Enhancement, Transmutation, Emission, Conjuration, Manipulation, and Specialization. The 6 categories comprising the core of Nen, Togashi's power system in the world of Hunter x Hunter. As with any power system with sufficiently emphasized categorization, the question of which of those categories is the best will arise in the minds of many fans, who will then most likely lose all interest in the topic after coming across thread after thread of power scalers screeching at one another, inevitably devolving into a debate on whether Jin could beat Meruem with one hand tied behind his back, or maybe even both. Who knows? Jin is very obviously a specialist after all, who can copy and counter any ability he sees, and can stop time, and transmute and emit radiation while being immune to it himself. Yeah, it's obvious, just read between the lines. Idiot. I'm obviously slightly exaggerating for comedic effect, but speaking of radiation, discussions on this or similar topics do tend to turn real radioactive real fast, so let's try to avoid that happening here. Please think of that intro just now as my substitute for therapy. They're just expensive. Back on topic, this video will be analyzing the Nen category I believe to, in general terms, be the most optimal for combat. And without further ado, the most combat-optimal Nen category, in my humble opinion, is Transmutation. The first of my 4 main arguments as to why this is the case is its proximity to Enhancement. Simply put, Enhancement has been stated as essential in Nen combat, especially in outright brawls. Having an 80% affinity for it means that the Transmuter is, for the most part, never in danger of getting one-shot by an attack, even from a Master Enhancer. Keep in mind, the only reason Kurapika managed to tank as many hits from Uvogin as he did was only because of Emperor Time maximally boosting his enhancement potency. This means that apart from whatever advantage their Hatsu may provide them, a Transmuter would be quite the capable brawler and would pose a danger to even an Enhancer in hand-to-hand combat. The second reason is the sheer unpredictability of Transmuter abilities. Transmuters, I believe, are second only to specialists and on par with conjurers with regards to the immense repertoire of potential abilities they can develop. By this I mean that knowing someone is a Transmuter tells you very little about what to expect from their Hatsu, and what precautions you need to take in order to avoid, counter, or stop it. This is a consequence stemming from the very essence of Transmutation, which quite honestly allows its users to either emulate or just full-on utilize the properties usually thought of as characteristic or even defining of other Nen categories. Specialization excluded, of course. To begin with, it partly emulates Emission in that it allows for its users to potentially wage combat not only in melee, but also short and even medium range. While long-range attacks are still the domain of emitters, as well as conjurers, manipulators, and of course specialists, Transmutation allows for quite the wiggle room in both range and area of effect. Next, Transmutation partly emulates Conjuration, in that it allows for its users to imitate the physical and chemical qualities of needles, rubber, gum, sometimes both, electricity, scissors, whatever this is, the goddamn sun, and apparently youth? It also emulates manipulation in that many Transmuters utilize a kind of aura solidification as the basis of their abilities, which they then manipulate to attack or even control other people or objects. As a side note, I just want to quickly mention here that while I do say manipulate, I really don't believe Zeno's Dragon Head, for example, is a Hatsu that actually utilizes manipulation. He's merely controlling his transmuted aura, which is still connected to him and is therefore not emitted. Additionally, it is also not being used to conjure anything. He's simply controlling his aura like one would do with Ten, Ryu, or Gyo, which of course has nothing to do with manipulation as a category. Now, while my only example of Transmutation emulating Enhancement is a bit, prickly, I really don't think it's outside realms of possibility. With enough argumentation, even some of the already mentioned Hatsu could possibly be interpreted as doing just that. But I won't stress this particular point too much. Third, Transmutation doesn't bring with itself the weaknesses present in other categories. Let's go down the list. Enhancement. While it is true that Enhancement is almost tailor-made for fighting, with its high destructive potential, amazing defensive capabilities, and superior healing factor, it is also relatively simple and predictable. And for the most part, basically comes down to a strong punch, a really strong punch, or a really goddamn strong punch. Those enhancers who are all-out hand-to-hand brawlers like Uvogin or Gon are also susceptible to Conjurer and especially Manipulator attacks, due to them more often than not possessing a one-hit win ability, like in the cases of Shalnar or Illumi. This is because the Manipulators need not worry too much about any unknowns, and can focus their attention more on succeeding with their attacks, and not waste time and resources on trying to understand and counter their opponent's ability. Emission. The greatest thing about Emission is that it allows for its users to wage combat unrestricted by range, for the most part. Long range, medium range, and even short and melee range attacks are not a problem due to it being adjacent to Enhancement, just like Transmutation. However, where they differ is the vast flexibility and versatility of Transmutation as opposed to that of Emission. Emitter abilities tend to be somewhat predictable in that they either fire off some kind of aura projectiles, create Nen beasts, or teleport. Usually a combination of two of these. Don't get me wrong, this is nothing to scoff at. They completely overshadow enhancers with regards to their ability repertoire, but then again, which category doesn't? However, I do believe that transmuters, conjurers, and especially specialists do indeed have the edge in this particular department. As far as conjuration and manipulation are concerned, they both share the same drawbacks to a greater or lesser extent. While they do allow for a lot of variety when creating a Hatsu, conjuration especially, the fact that they are as far away from Enhancement as they are means that in order for them to be used in battle effectively, a good deal of fine-tuning, strategic thinking, foresight, and knowledge is needed. As stated by Izunavi, a category like Conjuration is not really optimal for combat by itself, and must be thought over really carefully in order to make it so. Hence why most users of these categories tend to take more utility or support-centric roles, like Shalnar, Cortopi, and Shizuku do in the Phantom Troop. Not completely, of course, but this is why only those that are exceptionally talented, intelligent, and motivated will be able to effectively utilize these two categories in such a way. While on the flip side, the ability to punch things really hard or blast people with lasers is something most people find much more intuitive. And as a final point, Transmutation has allowed for the creation of some of the most deadly, unpredictable, and flexible Hatsus in the series. It has, for example, allowed for the creation of the relatively simple yet insanely versatile Hatsu that is Hisoka's Bungee Gun, which has, throughout the series, been used as a means for creating a surprise attack, a defensive wall, an escape mechanism, strategic positioning, wall running, as a frickin' impromptu flail made in combination with the severed head of the unluckiest bystander ever, and much, much more. But I don't want to get too deep into spoiler territory for those that have not read the manga. Oh my rubber Nen. On the other hand, it has also allowed for the creation of one of the most devastating abilities showcased by a human in the series. I'm of course referring to Phaeton's Rising Sun, an ability whose pure destructive power I believe to be second only to Netero's Zero Hand. This is of course thanks to the requirements for its activation, though I would definitely argue that a broken arm and some moderate level damage, along with very obvious anger issues, are all worth creating an ability which greatly exceeds Uvogin's Big Bang impact in power. I'm basing this on the fact that Worm, this adorable guy, who was not only near Ground Zero, but pretty much himself was Ground Zero of the explosion, still somehow managed to survive, at least for a little while, while Zazan, a Chimera and Commander, whose durability was established as impressive to say the least, ended up looking like what happened when my friend tried frying bacon that one time. Crispy goodness. So, to sum it up, I postulate that Transmutation is, in general terms, the most optimal combat-oriented Nen category. This because of its proximity to Enhancement, which makes it invaluable for battle, its amazing unpredictability with regards to Hatsu creation, the fact that it doesn't possess the weaknesses or inconveniences associated with the other categories, and the sheer versatility, adaptability, deadliness, and above all, potential for creativity that are all characteristic to a lot of the abilities created through it. Alright, with all that said and done, I want to quickly note something. An astute listener could have noticed that I kind of may not have mentioned specialization when directly comparing transmutation with the other categories. This was on purpose, as I didn't wish to slow down the pace of the video too much. To understand my thoughts on specialization and fully comprehend what I'll be saying next, I implore you to watch my previous video, titled Is Specialization Broken? After finishing this one, please don't ruin my already horrendous analytics. See, since specialists for the most part come pre-wired with their particular Hatsu and by extension their particular affinity distribution, if that concept is indeed even applicable to specialists, they don't have too much leeway with regards to choosing the core nature of their abilities. While someone like Killua could have just as easily decided to transmute poison instead of electricity, as his childhood was characterized by torture from both, for someone like Crawl or Pakunoda, I believe it would be more apt to say that they manifested rather than developed their particular abilities. This is why if the premise of the video was the best Nen category in general, specialization would have won hands down, as the abilities its users manifest are the ones most suited for them. However, since we're talking about combat specifically and are taking into account the category as a whole, this generalization means that specialization is simply too inconsistent. While someone with a combative personality and talent like Krollo is an absolute beast in battle, being able to stall two absolutely top-tier assassins while still holding back a bit, something I believe impossible if he had been a user of any of the other categories, someone like Pakunoda, let alone Neon, could never come close to reaching that level of combat prowess. This, of course, not only because of their lack of talent, but also their personalities, and by direct extension, in the case of specialists, their abilities. So, what you guys think? Am I way off base, right on the mark, or somewhere in between? I'd really love to hear your thoughts on this one. Now, on a slightly different note, two things I learned while looking up pics to put into this video. The fandom really has a thing for a slimmed down Miluki. I personally had no idea, but yeah, it's a thing. Also, never image such a character along with the word tight. I wanted to see if there was an appropriate picture I could use for Jing for when I was talking about him stomping Meruem, or some other pic I could edit somehow, but all I got out of that particular endeavor was a strong feeling of regret for not turning on private browsing. Maybe even a VPN or two. In any case, I really hope you enjoyed the video, subscribe if you want more content like this, feedback is always appreciated, and I'll see you in the next one. Also, happy 1000 days without a chapter. It's been a voyage.